Can you describe? Can you say what you personally think caused this crisis?
Well, it depends if you're talking about remote causes or immediate causes. Immediate causes is well known. That's the so-called subprime crisis, which originated in the United States, mainly because everybody was expecting a longer housing cycle with increasing prices in the housing sector. And the system is such in the United States, and when you have a turn point in the cycle, and when prices begin to decrease, then you have a lot of people experiencing troubles, foreclosures, and the problems begin to happen. But this happened already in the past several times. So then you have to go to dig a little more to understand what is behind this and why was the crisis so big and why it spilled over the rest of the world. And then you come to another kind of causes of the crisis, which is the lack of regulation and supervision in the banking system, and the fact that a lot of mortgage loans have been securitized in packages, which have been sold all over the world, with finally at the end a buyer not knowing at all what he did buy. So when a German bank, for instance, buys to an American bank a structured product in which you have 10%, 15%, 20% of housing mortgage from the United States, this guy in Germany has no idea at all of what's going to happen in the housing market in Maryland. So he buys something, he doesn't know exactly how it will behave. And so the basic principle of the banking system, which is that you take into account the risks you may have, was broken. The German bank, in my example, was just unable to have an estimate of the risks. So the idea was that if those risks are disseminated everywhere in small pieces, in small packages, then you avoid the problem because, of course, you may have some downturn and you may have some risk materializing, but it means that everybody will share a little part of the risk, which is close to an insurance problem. As for car insurance, for instance, some people may have an accident, but the cost will be shared by everybody through your insurance policy. That was a bit the same thing. Everybody was buying part of the risk, and all over the world the risk was shared. And so if something happened, well, of course, it will cost something, but it will cost a little to everybody, and it will not be very severe. What most of the people didn't see at this time is that at the same time it will create a huge liquidity problem. Why? Because at the same time this risk materialized, it was true to say that the amount of risk for everybody was small, but at the same time everybody was afraid and say, oh, we don't know how much risk you have, so I'm not going to have any deal with you, to make any business with you anymore, because I don't know how much risk you have in your own balance sheet. And so everything very rapidly began to freeze, because nobody trusts anybody anymore. And market economy is mainly a system of confidence. If you're not confident in the guy in front of you with whom you're making some business, you just avoid doing anything. And that's exactly what happened.
Simon Johnson, being one of them, was here for a relatively short time, wrote what has become a quite widely debated, discussed article in The Atlantic, in which I'm simplifying somewhat, but he argues that the economic power of the financial services industry in the United States has become, the economic and political power of the financial services industry has become so great that in effect, policymaking in the United States is a reflection of a kind of financial oligarchy and is prisoner to the industry. And he lays much of the blame for the crisis on that fact. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I think it's not wrong. Maybe it's a bit he puts too much emphasis on this, but I think the basic argument is true. The question is,
That's a remarkable statement for the managing director of the
yeah,
IMF
no,
to.
the question is it the nature of globalization to have such huge financial sector and following the size of the financial sector, political influence in democracies? And my answer is rather yes. It's difficult. It's difficult to imagine globalization without a financial sector which works. Of course, I think that we can have a financial sector which is smaller than the one we have today, more effective, and that possibly, I'm not sure, the crisis will help to have at the end of the crisis a smaller financial sector, a more effective financial sector. But even smaller, this remains a large part of the globalized economy. And the credit flows is exactly as the blood you have in your veins and which irrigates the whole economy. So there's no surprise that the influence, economic influence, but also political influence of the sector on the country is big, and especially in the United States, which is the most developed economies. So I think there's the Simon Johnson argument at the basic is not wrong. The question is, can you avoid the drawbacks, still keeping a developed financial sector which helps growth and innovation? And I think the answer is yes, but it means that you cannot rely totally on the market and expecting that they will regulate themselves alone, which was the kind of mantra during the last 2 decades, and that you have to accept the idea that even in a market economy, you need some regulation because for a lot of reasons, which has been very well studied by the academics and very well known, which has to do with externalities and a lot of things, you need to organize the market, not over-regulate the market, that also will be bad, but no regulation at all is in no way a solution for a market economy. And that is shown by this crisis, and especially by the behavior of the financial sector, which leads to the crisis.